Everybody, welcome back. Season 6, Episode 2. This is Episode 602. This is the ITXP. My name is Chuck. And look at here. I came up with another episode for you to listen to. Again, this is the show talking about IT profession, whether you're a sysadmin, developer, project manager, working in the technology space. You may not be in a formal IT department, but your mom and dad and grandma know that you work in IT. They probably think you work at the help desk, and you just laugh and roll your eyes every time you go to their house and they ask you to fix their computer for them. That's what this show is about. So this episode, I want to talk about something near and dear to my heart. It's nepotism. And the reason I want to talk about nepotism is not because I've experienced nepotism, and I have, and I'll talk to that in a few minutes. But it's more around what nepotism is. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What about the circle of friends scenario? The impact it has when you have nepotism come into play at your organization, and how you should deal with it. So let me take a step back and talk about how my experiences around nepotism started back in 2002, actually 2001, after September 11th. I did lose my job, and I found myself unemployed, as most of us did back in those days. I was very early into my career, 4 years into my career, didn't have enough experience to build up to find something very quickly. I had just landed a job in New York City as a senior Lotus Domino administrator, for those of you old school folks. And when I was let go, I was like, shit, the market's done. The economy is just in a shambles at that point in time because there's a lot of uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, nobody hires. And it was really hard to find a job. But I did have a connection. I knew people. And one of those people was the father of my then girlfriend, who is now my wife. And all he was doing was trying to get me to work. That's essentially what it was. He was actually in the middle of a project. He was a senior VP at this company, and he said, "Hey, I can get you a job, but you're going to have to do the work." And I was like, "Don't worry about that. I'll do the work. That's the least of your worries. I will do the work." So I got hired as a consultant for a few months. Nobody knew that I had a relationship with him, as most people probably don't know. When you bring someone in that you have a relationship with. Now, we weren't related at that point in time, but I did have a relationship with him. That was more of like a circle of friends type scenario. He brought me in. He knew me. He didn't know what my skill sets were at the time, but he knew what I did. He knew that I had landed a job as a senior Lotus Domino admin at a prominent law firm in the city with 6,000 users globally. The company I got hired for at the time was similar size at that point in time. And they also used Lotus Domino. So they said, we're going through this migration project from an office in New York to office in New Jersey. Let's bring you on as kind of offloading some of the day-to-day work that the current Lotus Domino admin is doing so he can focus on project-related stuff. And I said, sure, that's fine. I can do that. That's not a problem. Long story short, 8 months into the position, I killed it. I rocked it. I did with what we normally do, right? For those that have been in the industry like technology for a while, we excel at our careers. We do well. People like us. So people started noticing the skill sets that I brought, the value that I added to the organization. They were being my champions, my advocates. That's the word I'm looking for. They were trying to be my advocates so I can get hired permanently from folks in the help desk all the way to HR, because that was how much value they saw in me. And obviously, my now father-in-law, he held back. He kind of didn't want to do that because he knew the challenges that would bring, not only for me but for him. Because of this whole nepotism thing. And again, we weren't related at the time. So long story short, he lamented, he agreed, and he said, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. He took himself out of the equation and handed the decision off to his senior manager, who happened to be the CIO. And fortunately for me, the CIO liked me. Again, not because I had a relationship with my father-in-law, but because he saw the value that I added. Now, having the relationship with my father-in-law was an additional benefit because he knew I couldn't screw things up because of that relationship that I had. But there was also risk. Now, think about this. At that point in time, there was no relationship between my father-in-law and I, right? So there was just as much risk for him bringing me on than there was for me to take the position. Because if anything were to go south with the relationship between his daughter and myself, then that would put him at a place where he doesn't want to see my face every day. But he can't fire me. Although he could, because I was a consultant, so he could just eliminate my job. But even when they were championing me to get hired, if I had gotten hired and I had a fallout with his daughter, then there was risk there because he would have to see me. The relationship would be sour, blah, blah, blah. Regardless of whether he liked me or not. You know, if you're not a parent, you don't understand this yet. If you're a parent of a young child, you'll start to see how those relationships build. So there's risk on his part, there's risk on my part, because at that point in time, nobody knew I had a relationship with them. And as word got out, people started to say, oh, that's how he got the job. So that's really why I wanted to talk about nepotism, because I do have some background in it personally. And apologies if you can hear my dog. It's raining here in New Jersey at the moment. And my dog's a hound and she can't stand the rain. It's sensitive to her ears. But anyway, I wanted to talk about nepotism not only because I've experienced it personally, quote unquote, personally, right? I'll go down that path some more as we discuss it. But also because I'm experiencing it now again on the flip side. Not on the receiving end, and where I'm trying to hire somebody that's related to me, but because of some of the actions that have been going on in my current organization that I really want to talk. And I've kind of expressed this internally to my management team, to my coworkers, even to some friends. But I felt it should be discussed in how nepotism or the circle of friends scenario impacts an organization. So nepotism is the practice among those with power or influence of favoring relatives or friends, especially by giving them jobs. That's what I'm focusing on right now. I'm focusing on that particular scenario in where people in power are handing out jobs to people they know, whether they're relatives or not. Just relationships that they have. And in an organization, and I'm getting this from Webster's Dictionary and also Wikipedia, right? Nepotism at work can mean increased opportunity at a job, which is key. Attaining the job or being paid more than other similarly situated people. Arguments are made both for and against employment granted due to family connection, which is most common in small family-run businesses. On one hand, nepotism can provide stability and continuity. Critics cite studies that demonstrate decreased morale and commitment for non-related employees, which I want to touch upon, and a general negative attitude towards superior positions filled through nepotism. An article from Forbes magazine stated that there is no ladder to climb when the top rung is reserved for people with a certain name. Some businesses forbid nepotism as an ethical matter, considering it too troublesome and disruptive. And that's kind of where I fit in my scenario. I was not related to the person. I was, let's say, a circle of friends. So it really wasn't nepotism, but my father-in-law did take measures to ensure that it didn't fall under that nepotism clause within the organization, because there are organizations that have that clause in there. My current organization has it. Almost every large organization has it. So is this a good or a bad thing? And it really depends. It really, really depends. For me, it was a good thing because I was able to get my foot in the door in a large organization, large multinational organization after I was laid off. And I was able to demonstrate my value to them. But if you're on the flip side let's say you're on a flip side of the organization where you're trying to secure a better position within the firm or the organization, and somebody comes in out of the blue and gets the job that you wanted. How are you going to feel about that? And that's kind of where nepotism comes in negatively on the flip side. It does more harm than good because it does bring down morale within an organization. I know when I faced not criticism or ridicule, but when people started knowing that I had a relationship with my father-in-law at the time, people took notice. And while I would say people made their judgments on me for the most part, at least within my office that I worked at, they knew my value right off the bat, not because of my relationship, because they didn't know that at the time. It was easier for me to build relationships early on within the local office, but it was when the remote offices started knowing that I had a relationship with a senior leader within the organization that kind of it was challenging, let's say, to work with some of those people. Because look, you got to imagine that if you have the ear of someone within senior leadership because you're dating their daughter and then ultimately marrying them, it's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth because you don't want to say anything. Think about it. Would you bitch about your boss or about something going on within the organization if you know that it'll get back to someone within high up in the organization? Now, it posed challenges for me with the relationship that I was building with my father-in-law, because he was, initially he didn't start asking questions about what was going on, this and that, but he started playing this is for work game. And I would essentially be his personal tech support for the organization. And it put a divide in a relationship, because it was like, dude, are you really asking me because you value my opinion or because I'm your employee, essentially? Because I'm working within your organization. So it was hard. And even some people even said later on after the fact, I wound up being in that organization 10 years. But some people even said after the fact that relationship may have limited my progression within the company. And it's hard to tell, because I did progress fairly, not quickly, but I went as far as I can go within that organization. After 6 years, I got my first promotion as a manager, and then got promoted again as assistant director. And that was all due to organizational changes, which I talked about in one of my episodes last year. And it's hard to tell. Had I stayed there longer, would I have been higher up? I don't know. And to be honest with you, I'd never had those aspirations to achieve that level of management at such an early age. And I have talked about this before. I was 32 by the time I became an associate director, and it's fairly young. And I felt like I need to learn more about different leadership styles, how to determine my own leadership style. I had someone very much about 10 years older than me that was reporting to me, and I know he didn't like it. The reason I know he didn't like it is because he reported me to HR for any little thing that he felt was unjust. And he was one of the ones that gave me the most problems when he found out that I had a relationship early on with my father. And to be fair, I didn't marry his daughter until 3 years after I got the job as a permanent position. And that was even a harder decision, because then he had to go to HR and say, hey, look, we're going to become related. So he had to remove himself from any financial decisions about raise, salary increases, whatever, promotions. He had to remove himself from it. And that was a challenge because he was the head guy of the entire department. So again, it's from the ones experiencing or taking advantage of nepotism for the better. It's not all butterflies and rainbows. It really is challenging for most people. we saw that it was a problem. We saw that it was a challenge, and I probably would have left right after I got married if it wasn't for the technology change that was going on within the organization, moving away from Domino into the Microsoft realm with Exchange and stuff like that. I had the opportunity to learn migrations from Domino to Exchange, and that was a big hot thing in the early 2000s. Right? In that first decade of 2000, from 2000 to 2010, I cut my teeth on learning Exchange by doing those migrations. So it's not all butterflies and rainbows from that side. Now, I can tell you from the flip side that it does change the morale within an organization. What I like to talk about now is this whole circle of friends. So remember, I started as circle of friends. I did not start as nepotism because I was not related. I had a relationship, and this one was a personal relationship. And how many of us have those relationships that we build, and you call them professional relationships, that allow you to get your foot in the door into a different organization? Now, from my relationship, I came in as just a regular, I was a network analyst. So I went from senior Lotus Domino administrator to a network analyst when I first started the position there. Maybe a senior network analyst. I don't even remember. Because at that point in time, I had 4 years under my belt. So maybe I came in as a senior network analyst. But what I'm encountering now within my organization, and I talked about this last year, we had a new CIO come in from an organization back in 2018. She came in, and as many senior level C-suite folks do, they bring in their own team. And that's known within the industry, within any industry. You're going to bring in people that you know are going to work with you, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not. It sucks. So if you're in a position where the CIO or C-level person that you're reporting to leaves the organization, you better know that your job is on the line. I don't care how long you've been in the organization. I don't care how much value you think you add. Your job is on the line. So you either, one, start demonstrating that value again, or two, start looking for another job. So the CIO came in. She brought in all her direct reports. I don't think there's anybody left from the old regime that reports to her. Maybe one person. Actually, I don't even think that. I think everybody's gone now, whether on their own or through a package. And I started calling out how it's not over. So there's one organization that, she worked at. Everybody seemed to be there for a very long period of time. It was a smaller organization. And one after another, more and more people started coming from that organization. The new CISO came from that organization. Most of the leads from my team, my group, came from that organization. Almost everybody in CyberSec, InfoRisk, came from that organization. So now you have to imagine, in February 2019, we let go 100 and some odd people. Within infrastructure, it was 32 people. And since then, we've hired maybe double the amount, triple the amount, to the point where I was like, how many people are left from the other organization that they're coming over? And sure enough, a couple of weeks ago, I found out one more person got hired. And as he would tell it, he called up the CIO, told her, hey, I haven't been working for a year. And he was able to get a job. No job existed. They created a job for him. And boom, he's now in our group. Now, what really bothers me is that the positions that they're coming in at are at most twice the level that they left their other job. So if you were a senior person, you came in as a VP. If you were not a senior person, you came in as an AVP. So imagine that. So think about this in a nepotism form. You're being hired at a higher rate than you were previously. You're like, well, Chuck, how do you know what their titles were in their previous organization? You could just look on LinkedIn. And if it's a smaller organization, right, maybe the titles don't hold as much weight as they do in the larger organization or vice versa. I don't know. But based on some of the discussions I've had with these folks, they're not at the level that I would expect somebody to be at, technically. Not even managerially. They don't know how to lead people. This is their first foray into this. Now, could it be that the circle of friends from this scenario, there's an understanding is I'm going to bring you in. You part of my team. Now you either fall in line or I'm giving you this launching pad to kind of move off to somewhere else. I don't know, right? Are they coming in to get that notoriety from another large financial organization at a higher level than they were before so they can move on to somewhere else at a higher level? I don't know. And it's hard to tell. It's very, very hard to tell. And it's frustrating from the opposite side to see this coming in because we lost some good people, but we didn't have the opportunity to bring in the talent that we needed. There's a dynamic shift within the organization to stop relying on vendors. And that was one of the reasons I was hired, because I did have the hands-on experience as well as the leadership experience to just roll up my sleeves and do what needed to be done. And that was what the previous regime wanted. And the challenge that I'm facing is the previous regime were also very technical, and the new regime, not very technical. I call them paper pushers, essentially. So I don't understand how they can build a team if they don't have the technical capabilities to stand behind their team and understand what's going on. A lot of them talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And that's where my frustration comes in. And the other thing is that they've already built relationships with their former colleagues, with the leadership that they used to know at the other organization. They built those relationships. So there's nothing they have to do. They just have to walk in and make sure they don't screw things up. And now I have to rebuild relationships because now the regime that I came in under is gone, completely devastated. They're gone. Nobody's left except my direct line manager and a couple of other people. But the relationships I was forming outside of my own group, because I want to get out of my group, just gone. And now I have to rebuild those relationships. And it's almost like getting a new job, essentially. And the new team with the circle of friends, they have their own lingo. They have they just work together. They've been working together for sometimes 2 decades. 2 decades. That is solid relationships that you build. Working relationships and even personal relationships that you build. So if you're on the flip side of things, you have to rebuild those relationships, and it's just almost like getting a new job. So it definitely takes away from morale. And that's kind of where I'm at now. Because the cliques have formed, because everybody knows how to work with each other, it feels isolating at times. Now, if you're not the person that kisses ass, that's the way I look at it. Now, you can take it for what it's worth, but remember, I came from a blue-collar environment, and it's almost like kissing ass. You have to kiss ass again. You have to kind of rebuild those relationships. And because these people aren't as technical, it's hard for me to connect with them because I always feel like I'm talking to salespeople. And that's what's frustrating for me. And that's why my morale is low, because there could have been really great people hired within the organization had they been given the opportunity. And again, I'm not talking about the C-level people, because you're never going to get away from that. That's always going to be a challenge. And when the C-level people leave, they bring their own team in. And I started looking, I was like, is this illegal? Because what it really comes down to is favoritism. And forget about nepotism. It's just favoritism. And how does that play into the organization as a whole? I talked about the impact, right? To some degree, you feel some resentment, sometimes jealous, maybe angry. And here's the most dangerous one: indifferent. When you become indifferent, you impact the organization as a whole because you don't care anymore. You're just there going through the motions. How are you adding value if you become indifferent? And the biggest one for me is you lose leaders. We've lost a lot of good leaders within that time because they're like, I'm not going to fucking deal with this. I'm just going to find something else new. And to be fair, I was looking, but in the grand scheme of things, after talking to my wife and just kind of realizing where we're at with the whole COVID situation, I said, let me stick around. Let me do what I normally do, which is just excel at my job as a one-man team at this point and see how far I can go from here. I've been promised a team for 3 years. I've not gotten it, and that's fine with me. But you're going to lose skilled people when things like this happen, when the circle of friends comes along and says, hey, I'm going to bring in people that I know because I've worked with them. And here's the deal. Just because you've worked with somebody for 20 years, let's say 10 years or whatever, doesn't mean that that person is always right. You just know how they work, and you don't want to build new relationships or new insights or ideas. I always value bringing in new people because they bring that insight and even clarity outside of what you normally do. It may directly contradict what you know, but for me, that's the whole purpose of hiring somebody very skilled. And then you build a relationship on that. Some of the best relationships I have built professionally and personally was because we had opposing views, because you get to see what their views are. You get to learn something new. If you all have the Borg hive mind mentality, then what's the point of working? That's really where the frustration comes in. Because you don't know what these people do. You don't know what value they bring to the organization. Are they just happy to have a job and kind of going through the motions, knowing that they can't really lose their job because they have connections to higher up across the board? Because again, the other organization was much smaller. So it was almost like a family-based organization. And everybody had very, very close-knit relationships. So how do you deal with something like that? So if you find yourself in a situation like this, how do you deal with it? And there's no one right answer. There's no one right answer. While it's not illegal, and even it's really not unethical, you're going to have to deal with it some way. And it all depends on your personality. If you found yourself in an organization where you were the most technical person and the circle of friends comes in and they bring even more technical people with them, and you find yourself somewhere at the bottom trying to swim up and you can't handle that, you do one of two things in that scenario. You can either rise up to their level by taking training, by negotiating, by interacting with them, learning, right? Just kind of building that relationship at a technical level. Forget this imposter syndrome. Just kind of really building and put your ego aside and say, hey, let's work together. Let's start building where my gaps are. Let me start filling those gaps. Or if you can't handle that and you need to be the top person within that organization, then it's time to leave because you're at the bottom. And maybe it's time for you to go find someplace else where you can be at the top. On the flip side, if you're a very technical person and you have a bunch of salespeople coming in, you have to figure out what to do. If you need to build up some soft skills, then use this opportunity to build up those soft skills. Use this opportunity to determine what your next move is. If you're showing some value within an organization at a technical level, you shouldn't worry about your job unless somebody comes in from the circle of friends that does exactly what you do. Then that should be writing on the wall. And I always joke around with my colleagues and say, hey, I'm waiting for X, Y, and Z from directory services team to come in. Because that's a position that has yet to be filled. And the moment that they bring someone in to be my quote unquote peer, then that's the writing on the wall for me. So it really depends on your personality. You need to kind of take a step back, evaluate where you are within the organization and see what you want to do. A lot of times, all this is taking a look and reflecting within yourself and seeing what you want to do. I don't want to be a personal development person. That's not what I'm about. But a lot of the personal development books and audiobooks that I've read or listened to, the one key factor that they all have in common is taking a step back and reflecting within yourself. What do you want to do? Well, I don't know what I want to do, Chuck. I don't know. So start writing shit down. Figure out what you want to do. Set a goal and do it. Last year, I set a goal to try to pass 4 certifications. I only passed 2 because I'm a freaking idiot. I didn't pass the 2 harder ones that were way out of my league, right? The artificial intelligence one, I had no reason taking that exam, but I wanted to see what it was about. And the other one, the CISSP, that was kind of in my wheelhouse, but there were certain aspects and domains that I didn't have any experience in or any exposure to or strength in. But I said, you know what, let me do it. I should be able to pass it. I didn't. I got upset. I got angry, but I move on and take a look at it and reflect on what I want to do. I know I can't be a techie forever. I'm an old guy. I'm 43. I'm way too old. I'm not overvalued, but I'm very expensive to an organization. And that's why you'll see, if you're in my age bracket, you'll see a lot of organizations saying, you need 15 years of experience, blah, blah, blah. But when you walk in the door, they want somebody in their 30s because those 30-year-olds come at a lower cost depending on the organization. Now, I'm not talking about the Facebooks, the Googles, because those salaries are astronomical, especially if you're in the software engineering space, which is why a lot of kids want to get into the software engineering space, because they know that you can make a lot of money within Google, Facebook, and wherever. Sorry, I drew a blank there. But it can be done. It can be done. But really, anyway, getting back to my whole point. So when you're faced with a circle of friends or you're faced with nepotism, really take a look and take a step back and reflect on what you want to do. How is this going to impact you? How is it going to impact your career progression within that organization? Are your attempts to move forward blocked now because you have people ahead of you that already have relationships with senior management? Or does it open up new opportunities for you to move laterally? Remember, career progression isn't always about moving forward. Career progression can mean moving laterally or even going back down to go back up. So that's really what you need to think about when you're doing this reflection around the circle of friends. Really take a step back. Don't become jealous. Don't become angry. The worst thing to do is become indifferent. And some of these things that I wrote down, I actually went through when this whole process started. The resentment, the jealousy, the anger, the indifference, the disgust around how we lost so many good people because the CIO had to let go of people. It was documented in their objectives, and they put it up on a PowerPoint. The target number was 32. And I remember seeing that in one of the town halls in 2019. I think it was like the fourth quarter of 2019, where it said objective, let go of 32 people. And obviously they let go more than that, but still. So you have to really take a look back, take a step back, reflect on it. Don't let those emotions get to you. Yes, it's going to be challenging because the relationships have already been built. Cliques have been formed, and there's not much more you can do. You have to figure out, either leverage what the organization is giving you and move forward. I mean, that's really all it is. Just, take a step back to move forward. And again, forward may be lateral or maybe even going backwards. So that's really what I want to talk about today, about nepotism and the circle of friends experience, because it's something that I'm going through now. It's been a slow road going since this whole COVID thing. A lot of stuff's going on. I've been trying to record. Obviously, I'm not going to be doing every week because, again, I don't want to talk just to talk. But I'm going to start publishing this on YouTube now, and just so I can actually see if I can get more exposure. But you can follow me on Twitter at the ITXP, Instagram, the _IT_XP, and YouTube, the ITXP. Email me if you want, social-media at the ITXP. And we'll talk to you next time. Take care. Bye.